Another administration official told reporters yesterday the president wants Israel to, quote, think very carefully and strategically about how to respond to Iran, adding that Israel got the best of the exchange since most of the missiles were intercepted. And that's, I think, where one of the biggest stories of this lies. Let's bring in the President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. He's author of the weekly newsletter, Home and Away, available on Substack. And former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He is Chief International Analyst for NBC News. And Admiral, if I could start with you on exactly what happened during the interception. In the hours before, who got together, who led it, the U.S., and how important was it that most of these drones and missiles, rockets were intercepted? I mean, the message about Iran and to Iran seems to me to be vital here.
I agree. And I spent much of my career at sea in command of guided missile destroyers and cruisers. This was the mission, shooting down missiles directed at our carriers, at our allies. And I can't imagine a better day for the air defenders than to knock down 350 drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. It's a remarkable feat of military arms. And it also speaks to the military mismatch, frankly, between Iran, which has reasonable technology in those zones, but the capabilities on the Allied side. In terms of how this was put together, think of it as a defense in depth. So it begins with satellite coverage that sees these launches at great distance, command and control that's lashed together by the U.S., Israel, NATO partners, and Arab partners. Significantly, Jordan, for example, was participating in shooting down some of these capabilities. So all of that gets knit together, Mika, and then individual targets are apportioned to the launcher systems. So that's a long way of saying very good performance. Now, having said all that, let's be honest here. Tehran telegraphed this. It had a bit of a performative feel to it. I don't think they wanted to end up in a situation where 200 Israelis got killed by a cruise missile or a ballistic missile. And so at the end of the day here, that's why I think the international pressure landing on the Israelis not to respond excessively makes a lot of sense. Look for cyber, maybe going after Iranian maritime assets, perhaps special forces, if you will, back to the status quo ante. I think that's how we're headed. Let's hope the Israelis don't choose a massive military response. That really would escalate the situation considerably.
Yeah, and you've even got voices here like John Bolton saying that Israel should go big right now. It was clearly a military win, Admiral Stavridis, for Israel, but to some extent, do you think it was also a political and diplomatic win? I mean, we've seen for the first time since October the 7th, the narrative shift to the Israeli military doing something right and being powerful once again in a way that it had lost some of that veneer after the attacks of October the 7th. And there's this big diplomatic coalition. Israel was looking isolated over its activities in Gaza. And now that narrative, at least in the short term, has shifted to that we are standing by Israel, not just the United Kingdom, which also we see David Cameron this morning urging the Israelis to be smart, but also tough, but emphasis on the smart there. But the Jordanians joining that coalition of countries that was helping Israel out. So politically and diplomatically, this looks like a good moment for Israel. How does it capitalize on that and not risk jeopardizing that?
What a good point. And I'll just add to your list of voices speaking up, the G7, which represents well over half the world's gross domestic product, squarely behind Israel on this one. And let's face it, a lot of those voices want to avoid a wider war, not only because we all want to avoid state-on-state conflict, but also the effect on the global economy. Iran's first move in a big regional war, my view, will be to close the Strait of Hormuz. There goes 25% of the world's oil bottled up in the Persian Gulf. So there's a lot of motivation here. In terms of your point, Caddy, yes, this does shift the narrative somewhat. And let's observe that this was the Israeli military defending its country and doing it very effectively. And compare that to frankly, the debacle of October 7th, when Israeli women and children were slaughtered in their numbers due to a failure by the Israeli Defense Forces and the intelligence services of Israel. So to Richard's excellent point, they will be looking at a menu of options here, and I hope they consider the importance of that global narrative, which they have been losing terribly because of their activities in Gaza. Here is a chance to get some of that dialed back in favor of Israel.
Definitely a possible opportunity there.